Hey everyone, welcome back to The Whole Truth. I'm Gillard Bell. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Today I want to talk about anti-Semitism because I have what I think is somewhat a unusual take, at least something I don't see talked about that often. And if you're interested in actually fighting anti-Semitism or studying it, I think it's important because a lot of people misunderstand it, in my opinion. A lot of people think anti-Semitism can be defeated with better arguments or better statistics, more historical facts. But I don't think that works. Not for real anti-Semites. Because for them, their anti-Semitism or Jew hatred, whatever you want to call it, is fundamentally not driven by evidence or reason. It's driven by a passion. And the person who explained this best, in my opinion, was Jean-Paul Sartre in his 1946 essay, Antisemite and Jew. And this is the core idea of that essay. Basically, he argues that anti-Semitism is not a mistaken conclusion reached after reasoning, but a psychological choice. And it's chosen because it makes the anti-Semite feel good, okay? That's the key. They get emotional satisfaction from it. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not people who have been exposed to propaganda and misinformation against Israel and Jews, and that they could be reasoned with. In fact, might reach them. But the true anti-Semite, you can't argue them out of it. Because their hatred is not downstream from facts. The hatred comes first, and then the arguments come second to fit or to justify the hatred. Let's think of an analogy. Somebody who passionately hates tomatoes, the taste of tomatoes. You can explain to this person, the nutritional value of tomatoes. You can tell them there's different ways to cook it. You can prove they're healthy. Doesn't matter. The person hates tomatoes. The emotional reaction or the taste is primary, and any other justifications is secondary. Anti-Semitism works the same way, at least according to Sartre. To use another example, if you've seen the movie Inglourious Bastards, there's a scene where the character played by Christoph Waltz, the Jew hunter, Colonel Landa, is talking with the French dairy farmer, and he uses the analogy of rats versus squirrels. And he asks the farmer, do you have a hatred? How would you react if you see a rat? And the farmer says, expectedly, with disgust. And the Christoph Waltz characters asks him to, explain why. Oh, it's because they can carry diseases. Oh, well, yeah, but so can squirrels. Any disease a rat carries, a squirrel could, but if a squirrel comes to your house, you're not really going to treat it the same way. And the point is that you don't really know why rats disgust you or repulse you. They just do. And it doesn't really matter what reasoning you get. You're just going to be repulsed by rats. It's a innate hatred. And again, Sartre argues that anti-Semitism works much the same way. So, why do people have this passion? Well, for one thing, it simplifies everything. It simplifies the world. It takes away personal responsibility. It explains complex societal problems. It's all the Jews' fault. Jews are the reason why I don't have enough money. Jews are the reason why my country is such and such. So it's much easier. Now, and Sartre discusses this as bad faith, self-deception, pretending that you're not free or you're not making your own choices, but when in fact you are. The anti-Semite escapes freedom by blaming the Jew. Now, Sartre also in his essay has another character called the Democrat. And this person in this essay is not anti-Semitic, but they underestimate anti-Semitism. They think that it's just based on ignorance, or it can be reasoned away, or it's exaggerated. But Sartre says that that's naive. And we all know a lot of people like this that really, J.D. Vance recently, I don't think he's anti-Semitic at all, but he tends to downplay the anti-Semitism that's growing in certain sections of the right. So, again, it's important to understand this, what anti-Semitism is, in order to deal with it. Let's talk about one of the most common examples or reasons that an anti-Semite says that they dislike Jews. And here's a common one, is that Jews were behind the communist revolution. But you might respond and say, well, there was many Jews that were opposed to the communist revolution, and there were many non-Jews that were behind it as well. But the argument will just shift, okay? Well, those non-Jews were manipulated by the Jews. Or, okay, fine, not communism wasn't Jewish, but such and such was. The target moves, because the conclusion the conclusion was already foregone. The Jews are to blame for all of the problems, and it doesn't really matter what facts you present. Let me give you another example that happened recently. Tucker Carlson said that one way to judge how well Christians are treated in a country is to look at the population of Christians in that country and how they shifted over time. And so he points to Israel with the, conclusion in his head that Israel bad for Christians. And so he says, well, Israel's population of Christians has decreased in absolute numbers since Israel's creation. But he got his numbers wrong. The truth is that the population of Christians in Israel has went from 40,000 before, at the creation of Israel, to about 180,000 now, which is an increase of 350%. So, according to his own premise, Christians are very well treated in Israel. But is that actually going to change his conclusion? No, because his conclusion is already that Jews and Israel are bad for Christians. And so his own premise doesn't really matter. You see this all the time with Israel. Whenever there's a the hatred of Israel is, you could tell, it's something very deep. It comes from a place, it's irrational with many people. And I'm not saying that Israel is above reproach. That's anybody that is going to be interpreting it that way is operating in bad faith. I'm not saying that Israel is above reproach, but I'm talking about the people who clearly have a emotional hatred of Israel, because they look at any perceived tragedy that happened as a result of Israeli actions or actual tragedy, and it animates them to such an extent. And yet when much worse or much more brutal tragedies happen elsewhere, you don't get that same reaction. You don't get the same reaction from all these people on college campuses who for years were protesting against Israel's defensive war in Gaza after October 7th, where tragically 40,000 Gazan civilians were killed, along with 20 to 30,000 Hamas fighters over 2 years. And yet that same number, if not more, Iranian civilians were just killed over the span of 2 weeks by their own regime, and you're not seeing any reaction or any protests in college campuses. How do you explain that if it's not a irrational hatred of Israel that is born from the same irrational hatred of Jews that has existed for centuries? Now it's less socially acceptable, especially post-Holocaust, to come out and just say, I hate Jews. But it is okay to say, I hate Zionists. Well, what is a Zionist? Just somebody who believes that Jews have the right to their own nation. So Again, it doesn't matter. You can argue policy, you can argue tactics. The person that hates Israel in this way is impossible to reason with. And, at a certain point, and Sartre talks about this, they come to accept that their arguments are weak, that their facts are wrong. It doesn't really matter to them. And in fact, sometimes they delight in seeing their interlocutor having to struggle to constantly rebut all of their fatuous arguments, because they don't care about that. They don't care about the reason. They just have this hatred. So my main point here is that anti-Semitism, if you understand it this way, as passion first, justification second, you'll understand why arguing or reasoning against it in the way that other arguments can be made is just not going to work. So that's my opinion. Thank you.